My name is Jessie Ace. I'm part of a group of enabled warriors that you've probably never heard of. We're fighting back against our invisible illness and taking the dis out of disability. We don't give sympathy to our symptoms. They enable us to be the warrior that we are. If you ask doctors and nurses, they'd say what we're doing is impossible. But pushing the limits of our conditions is something that we have to break through every single day. So we push the limits. We are mentally strong, and we can do anything. The question is, how far can we push those limits? This podcast will give you the answers. I'm Jessie Ace, and this is the Disabled to Enabled podcast. Experience the benefits of pure hive power with the bee-powered honey. This therapeutic blend of royal jelly, bee pollen, propolis, and raw honey is designed to support those heavy, low-energy kind of days while supporting your immune system, promoting mental clarity and encouraging overall balance. Try a spoonful on those sleepy mornings, napless afternoons, and before intense workouts. So go and click the link in the show note and invest in your health today. Okay, let's get into the first part of our interview with today's guest. So this section focuses on the actual diagnosis, what their illness is, and how it affects our guest. Keep listening out for part 2 to find out how they coped and thrived afterward. And then in part 3, listen out for today's guest's answers in the super quick secrets round. Or should we say not so super quick secrets round? Enabled Warriors, our next guest on the show is a devastating illness expert and internationally sought after writer and speaker. She's been featured on Sick Boy podcast and is a consultant on AMI's series about dating and disability called There's Something You Should Know. She has recently partnered with the award-winning Shaftesbury Films to develop a scripted series whose main character has MS and is featured in a WebMD-produced documentary short that is out now. Exciting. Link is in the show notes for that. She was diagnosed with relapsing remitting MS in 2001 and it's now secondary progressive, and she's here to talk with us today about the ups and downs of living with chronic illness. Enabled Warriors, please help me in welcoming to the show the influential Canadian blogger behind Tripping on Air, the fabulous Ardra Shephard, everybody! Woo! Hey, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. So let's get straight into part 1 of our interview by chatting about the actual diagnosis. Like what happened back in 2001, you know, that day when things went a bit weird. Yeah, tell us about that. What happened?
I was having pain in my eyes and especially when I rolled my eyes, which I think I probably do and did a lot, unfortunately. I thought it was like maybe migraines. I definitely didn't think it could be something serious. And I was like medicating with a lot of over-the-counter headache medication. And it was getting worse for about 2 weeks, I would say. And then I woke up with very blurred, limited vision in one eye. And I thought, that's not normal. And so I walked myself to the emergency room. And also I was losing some hearing in the opposite ear. So I had like very low vision in one eye and some hearing loss in the other ear. I really thought I had some kind of infection. So I walked myself to Emerge and I was there the whole day. I had a whole bunch of tests. I was referred to a neurologist the next day. And so unlike a lot of people who wait months, maybe even years for diagnosis, I was diagnosed very quickly. I was told, the next day I was told, you have optic neuritis. And there's a 50% chance you have MS because that's an often early presenting symptom of MS. So I was sent for an MRI and was diagnosed with the results of that like within a month. It was very fast and kind of earth-shattering. Like I just thought I needed a prescription. I was like in my early 20s. I thought, you feel kind of invincible. You don't think you're going to get something so major.
For sure, yeah. So you were diagnosed like really, really young then, weren't you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like been my whole adult life, basically. It's hard to remember the time before.
Yeah, I can imagine. So where were you in that kind of time of your life? Because so I was diagnosed early 20s as well.
Yeah.
At It literally happened on the last day of university, typically. Was yours kind of around the same sort of time?
Yes. Just dating and figuring out what you want to do. Like your whole life is ahead of you. And then all of a sudden, you feel like your options are so much more limited. And also, I think at that stage, you don't, you like just left your parents, like you're kind of on your own for the first time, and like,
Yeah.
whoa, there's nothing that makes you feel more alone than getting smacked with something like that.
Totally. Because I could totally relate to you as well when you said you felt invincible. I was literally the same. And I actually put off going to the doctors for a whole week because I thought, oh, the left side of my body stopped working. Oh, it's fine. It'll come back. This is
Yeah.
wrong with me, obviously. Like, what? It's crazy. So you can't really remember any kind of symptoms leading up to that point or
There
any.
were none. It was very, I mean, I know a lot of people can go a long time having like weird sensory things, but for me, it was like a light switch. It was like one day I was fine, the next day I was so not fine. And
Mm,
just like unbelievably tired, like just couldn't stay awake. And that was like totally new to me also. I mean, I was young, so I was staying up late and going out and doing all these things, but all of a sudden I was just like, I felt like I needed to sleep 18 hours a day. It was awful.
yeah. Oh, gosh. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Because it's just not right for someone that young to be so exhausted constantly.
Yep.
Gosh. So, yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about like what MS briefly is? I know we've touched on it a little bit already, but
Yeah, so it's a demyelinating disease. So the fatty coating that protects your nerves get attacked by your own body. So it's kind of a civil war going on in your body. It's a disease of the brain, the spinal cord, and the optic nerve. So really, anything that's controlled by your CNS can be impacted. So my presenting symptom was vision loss and hearing loss and fatigue. A month after that, I started to have balance and mobility problems and some sensory issues with some like numbness and tingling. And but really, it can affect everything, anything in your body. It's very unpredictable. It's different in every person that has it, and it's. I mean, my MS today doesn't look like my MS from years ago either. It's different from person to person, but even within the same person, it's different every day sometimes.
that's really interesting. So how was it kind of, how have you gone from then to now? Like what kind of symptoms do you feel now that you didn't feel then or vice versa?
Yeah, so the nature of relapsing remitting disease with MS is you have an attack and or an exacerbation, and there's a sudden onset of symptoms, and then there's a period of recovery, but you don't always get back to baseline. So while I ended up losing vision in both eyes and lost the privilege of driving, and really could only see dark and light for several months, I did have significant recovery, but I never got back to my baseline. And so these periods, these attacks happen over years, and the damage accrues. So you will have these periods of recovery, but you don't always get back to baseline, and you just incrementally get worse. And then in the secondary progressive stage, you stop having these attacks, and the damage is slower, but without the periods of recovery.
Mm,
So that's kind of where I'm at now.
that's crazy. So, wow. So going back to when you lost vision in both eyes, I mean, how on earth did you feel back then? Like, what did you do?
I mean, it's kind of, I think, one of those things that you process in hindsight,
Mm,
where when you're in it, you just do what you have to do to survive. Like, you can't even really process it. It's so traumatizing, and really, really, really scary. And I can remember sort of comparing my symptoms too to like, because I was also having difficulty walking, and thinking like, oh, what's worse? Would I rather lose my vision or my ability to walk? And it's just like questions you should never have to ask yourself, right? Like, and
yeah.
anyway, you don't get a choice. So, and maybe it's both. It's a hard disease.
Exactly. Yeah. I know. I can completely relate because like I totally used to do that all the time. And I remember thinking to myself, like a lot of my aunts and things have fibromyalgia. And I was telling myself constantly, like, I'm glad that it's not that. I'm glad that it's not like overwhelming pain all the time. But then in the hindsight, I'm kind of like, well, you did lose half of your body. Like, is
Yeah.
that better? Like, it's like making that comparison all the time, isn't it? It's
And
hard.
it's so unhelpful,
Mm.
like I think to compare ourselves to others, and even to ourselves, it's like it, it's it's so easy to say don't do it, but
Oh, I know.
um,
We
yeah,
all do.
there's nothing good that comes of it, really. Like, and oh my gosh, just when you think you have like all you can handle, um, because I mean, I do have a fair amount of pain with this disease also. But like just when you think you have all you can handle, like you fall and break your arm, and then you're like, oh, you thought
Yeah.
it was bad yesterday? Well, now try doing everything with your left arm.
Interesting. Did you know anything about MS like prior to getting it?
So I actually had a girlfriend whose best friend just got diagnosed maybe 6 months earlier.
Oh,
And
wow.
I remember thinking, like, that's the worst thing that could happen to somebody
Mm.
randomly. Like, but I didn't know enough about it. I really did think that I might die.
Mm.
So, um, yeah, I knew it was bad. Like, I wasn't one of those people who believed it was manageable. Like, I lost my mind. I was very, very scared.
I can imagine, yeah, because I mean, I don't know what things like in Canada where you are right now, but like here, I wasn't given any information about it or anything. My doctor literally told me in hospital, go home, Google it for yourself, find out what it is for yourself. And I thought that was normal. So I was like, oh, okay, fine.
My doctor
Obviously,
told me not to Google anything.
do not Google anything.
He
Doctor,
told me to stay off the internet. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's like how I wonder how do we want that news delivered to us, because um, it is a tough pill to swallow,
mm,
but I don't know that it does us a service to pretend that it's not bad. You know what I mean? Like, I think
mm.
I kind of feel like what I would like to hear is like, this is going to be hard, but here are the tools and the resources that you will find to like manage and adapt and just sort of encourage that way. I don't
Yeah,
know.
totally, totally. And even like providing you with resources to go and actually look at properly rather than just
Yeah.
generically on Google.
Yeah. I think it's
So,
like I sought out patient stories, and connections. I wanted to find people who were like young and going through the same life stages as
yeah,
me.
same
And that was a lot harder to do then than it is now.
here. Yeah, there's so many great sites now that can connect you. I mean, worries listening, if you've not found, like, if you've been diagnosed with MS and you've not quite found your kind of people yet, then you've got things like Shift MS that are in the UK. You've got like My MS Team as well. I mean, can you think of any, Ardra, that you can add to that?
I mean, I think it depends like where you are and what you need, but it's it's not that hard to find. I think even like Facebook has so many groups, you can find people in your own communities, but globally also. Uh,
Mm.
yeah,
Totally. And if you can't find one, start one. That's my
yeah,
motto.
that's true. That's like I feel like that's part of why and how I started my blog was because
mm,
um, I'm like especially there's so much out there now, but in the dark ages when I was diagnosed, there were no voices that resonated with me. Like the books that I read were or that were available were written by people who were older, who had more progressive illness, who were
yeah.
men. There was nothing out there that was speaking my language. So
That's exactly why I got into blogging as well. But we're going to cover all of that in the kind of the next part. So, final question before we go into the next part is, can you describe the lowest point of your diagnosis? Like, was there a time when you just did not feel like you could see the light at the end of the tunnel? And how did you come out of that?
I think that I've had like many periods of feeling like this is the worst MS day of my life. I mean, I think also MS is a moving target. So you're not handed all of your symptoms and crap on day one.
No.
So every time you have a new symptom or some progression or worsening, that's a grief that you need to process and go through. And so I think there's the journey to acceptance and like getting out of that hole is a constant evolution. Like it's not, yeah, I can think of many times when I've been on the floor in tears, and I don't think it's bad. I think it's normal and healthy. Like you have to grieve what you are going through and what you're losing before you can kind of pick yourself up and figure out a way to solve whatever the most recent problem is that needs solving.
Totally. I think it's important to say as well, and I know we say this in multiple episodes, but I just want to reiterate this whole thing, is that it's normal to go through the 5 stages of grief when you first get diagnosed. It's normal to go through that when you've had this kind of emotional trauma going on.
Yeah.
So if you're out there and you're feeling quite sad right now, that's totally normal. It'll be okay. It'll get better.
It's also normal to re-experience that, you know, like
absolutely, yeah.
15 years later, however, like, you know, it's yeah, I think we like culturally live in a world that doesn't want us to lean into sad feelings or grief, and I think the only way out is through. And so you've got to like sit in it for a while. Yeah. Acknowledge what you're losing. Like it's
true. And I think sometimes as well, something can kind of trigger it and kind of bring it all back for some reason. I had to go for an MRI at a different hospital, and it was actually the hospital that I was first diagnosed at. And just walking through those doors and being in those corridors on my own, it kind of triggered those feelings that I first had, like going into the hospital for the first time. It was the first time I'd ever been in hospital for me and not visiting someone, you know. So that led me to like serious sad vibes going on.
Well, it's a trauma. I mean, imagine if somebody did to you what your own body is doing to you. They'd be in jail.
They would be in jail.
Like it would be a massive assault. And you'd be traumatized by that. And so, you know.
You would, yeah. Oh my goodness. Enabled Warriors, that's it for part 1. In the next part, we will discuss the amazing things that our guest today has done since their diagnosis. Warriors, look out for part 2. And if there is anything that we've spoken about so far that you can relate to, then please tell us in the comments, and remember to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening today. Are you ready to fight back against your chronic illness and go from being disabled to enabled? Do you want to be an enabled warrior? Someone who's brave, strong, and confident, and someone who's ready to find a way to achieve awesome things despite a diagnosis. This is your invitation. Check out disabled2enabled.com for articles and reviews to find out how you can become enabled too. Subscribe to the podcast to always be in the know. If you think this podcast is better than sleeping in on a Sunday, tickle that subscribe or follow button wherever you're listening. And make sure to share this episode with someone who needs some inspiration. Want to ask your questions to future guests? Make sure to join our Enabled Warriors tribe on Facebook and look out for our question posts. Before we go, check out Disabled2Enabled on Instagram for posts that tell it like it is. And remember, warriors, stay enabled.